Good morning, Epainos family and friends, and welcome to our teaching for today, Sunday, the 2nd of August 2020, and a very special welcome in the name of Messiah to all of our first-time viewers. If you're finding our teaching to be a source of blessing, then kindly share the link with your friends and tell them about the great things that you are learning here. Help us to grow the message of the gospel of the kingdom proclaimed by our Master, Yeshua of Nazareth. At Epainos, our focus is on teaching God's word and living it to his glory. We have taken it upon ourselves in the outworking of our new understanding of discipleship to re-examine the teachings of our Master and consider their application. James, Yaakov, the earthly brother of Yeshua, says in his letter, James 1 and verse 22, "Prove yourselves doers of the word, and not merely hearers who delude themselves." Consequently, as we prove ourselves positive in this regard, let's remind ourselves that the word that James is referring to is the Tanakh, or more specifically, the Torah. James continues our instruction by reminding us in the same letter a few verses on, James 1 and verse 25. "But one who looks intently at the perfect law, the law of liberty, and abides by it, not having become a forgetful hearer, but an effectual doer, this man will be blessed in what he does." I also like the complete Jewish Bible version of translation of this particular verse, where it says, "But if a person looks closely into the perfect Torah, which gives freedom, and continues, becoming not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work it requires, then he will be blessed in what he does." If it is indeed your desire to be blessed in what you do, then looking intently, looking closely into the Torah, as we are doing, is the means that our Master, the Messiah of Israel, gives us through his teaching on the Sermon on the Mount. Furthermore, if you've not already done so, the seriousness of the times in which we are now living compels me to urge you today to put your trust in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and then submit to the teachings of his Son, Yeshua of Nazareth, and commit to faithfully following Yeshua as a disciple. I'm Pastor Davey, and I'm the under-shepherd for the Epainos congregation of followers of Yeshua, who are based in Mile End, East London, in the UK. The purpose of our congregation is to equip disciples, enabling them to bring the ethics of the coming kingdom into their homes, neighborhoods, and workplaces as a foretaste of that future time of love, peace, and justice in the world, and also to introduce people to the King of the kingdom spoken of in the scriptures, Jesus of Nazareth, Yeshua, the Messiah of Israel, the King of the Jews, the Lord of the nations. To be abundantly clear, the future time that I'm referring to is Messiah Yeshua's 1,000-year reign, sometimes called the millennial reign of Messiah, or simply the millennium. It is his kingdom which will be here on earth, where he will rule from Jerusalem, which becomes the capital of the world. From there, he will reign over the entire world as the prophesied descendant of King David. Praise be to God. Well, we continue our Sermon on the Mount series today, but first, let me remind you what the Apostle Paul wrote in his letter to disciples in Rome. Reading from his letter in Romans chapter 6, verses 17 to 18, he says this, "But thanks be to God, that though you were slaves of sin, you became obedient from the heart to that form of teaching to which you were committed, and having been freed from sin, you became slaves of righteousness. I draw your attention in particular to that phrase there, obedient from the heart. Obedience from the heart is so much easier when we understand the heart of the word. And the heart of the word, that is the heart of the Torah, is exactly what our Master taught in the Sermon on the Mount, and indeed throughout his entire life in word and in deed. Our theme today is giving to those who ask. Giving to those who ask. And our focus verse is Matthew chapter 5, verse 42. And it reads thus: Give to him who asks of you, and do not turn away from him who wants to borrow from you. Let me read that again. Give to him who asks from you, and do not turn away from him who wants to borrow from you. You may instantly recognize that this week's teaching continues from last week's, which was in Matthew chapter 5, verses 38 to 39, where the Master continues his challenge to his disciples, and that includes us, to be an entirely different breed of people. There, Yeshua instructs his disciples not to embrace hatred, which could lead to murder, and instead always begin our heart's response to mistreatment from a position of prayer for those who ill-treat us and an openness towards forgiveness. Perhaps I should just restate that again. Yeshua instructs his disciples not to embrace hatred, which could lead to murder, and instead always begin our heart's response to mistreatment from a position of prayer for those who ill-treat us and an openness towards forgiveness. It's all about our hearts again in this week's teaching. Heart's disposition towards those in need. And I want to just lay it out there from the outset that disciples of Yeshua can never turn away from giving something to someone who asks or who is in need, even if only a pittance. Let's now remember that Yeshua is instructing his disciples on how to seek first to enter the kingdom. And he tells them to give freely to those in need. As we already said, give to him who asks of you, and do not turn away from him who wants to borrow from you. So, a disciple of Yeshua, and as disciples of Yeshua, we should never feel at liberty to neglect someone asking for help. Even if we can only give a few coins, we should give nonetheless. In preparing this, and I think I've shared this before, but it's good to say it here again. There's a story, my own family, of course. I think at one point in time when myself and my dear wife were traveling on the London Underground, and we'd arrived at the Underground station that we would get off to go home, coming through the barriers and then walking on the tunnel that bring you outside onto the street. On this particular occasion, and not just simply this time, there was a homeless guy who was there, and he asked if we had any money. And we didn't have any money, because you know there's an increasing move towards a cashless society. We didn't have any money, but as we walked away, my wife's heart was moved with compassion for the guy, and so we went into a nearby kebab shop where they sold chicken and chips, and she ordered some chicken and chips and a cup of tea for him. And so we did that. I think we probably missed the bus that we would have normally taken home, but we were on this mission to bless this homeless person. So having got the chicken and chips and a cup of tea, Patricia went back with a smile on her face to give to this homeless man. And when he received the chicken and chips, he was really pleased to receive it, and said, "Thank you." Then he had a sip of the tea and said, "No sugar." Well, thought it was a little bit cheeky because he was getting something free. But, you know, I give this story because sometimes when you do your gifts of charity or acts of grace and loving kindness towards others, they may not necessarily fully appreciate all that you've done or necessarily respond with gratitude, but we ought to give nonetheless. Yeshua's instruction about giving freely and open-handedly was not a new commandment. In telling his disciples to give freely to those who asked of them and to lend to those who wanted to borrow from them, Rabbi Yeshua was simply paraphrasing the Torah's commandment of giving charity and loans to support the poor. Deuteronomy chapter 15, verses 7 and 8 say, "If there is a poor man with you, one of your brothers, in any of your towns in your land, which the Lord, capital L-O-R-D, which the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not harden your heart, nor close your hand from your poor brother, but you shall freely open your hand to him, and shall generously lend him sufficient for his need in whatever he lacks." Wow. So once again, let's pay very close attention to the heart attitude that the Torah is addressing here. And notice some very key words there. You shall not harden your heart. You shall not close your hand from your poor brother, but you shall freely open your hand to him and shall generously lend him. I love those words there. You may notice them. There's this picture of a hardened, one might wish to say calcified in modern day term, but a hardened heart. And for those of you in the medical profession will probably know of those things which can lead to, in a physical sense, those things which can lead to actually hardening of the arteries and the cavities, the chambers of the heart through poor diet and other things like that. But it is the spiritual idea that is being conveyed here, as in the natural, so in the spiritual. So we have the hardened heart, the calcified heart. Then there is this picture of closing the hand. For those of us, we may be more familiar with the term being tight-fisted. Tight-fisted, or is it simply tight? In contrast to that, the Torah teaches us that we should be open-handed. Open-handed. And if we didn't get it, then we are told that we shall generously lend. There is this, at the heart of the Torah is the heart of generosity. 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 These are phrases, as I've already said: hardened, calcified heart, tight-fisted, open-handed, generosity. These are phrases and descriptions that we are all very familiar with. And so the Master assumes that we will give to those in need. He assumes that we will. Because in Matthew chapter 6 and verse 2, he says, "So when you give to the poor." Notice that he says when, not if. When you give to the poor. And as we remind ourselves that our Master was always summarizing and explaining the Torah, it's good for us to look at the wonderful laws that address the conduct of agriculture within Israel. although these laws historically applied and still apply within Israel's borders, the application of providing for the underprivileged is much broader than Israel's borders. Let's read Leviticus chapter 19 and verses 9 to 10. Now, when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap to the very corners of your field, nor shall you gather the gleanings of your harvest, nor shall you glean your vineyard, nor shall you gather the fallen fruit of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the needy and for the stranger. I am the Lord your God. I very often think as I read through the Torah and I hear the Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, emphasizing commandments with these 6 words. I am the Lord your God. It's almost as if he is emphatically stating, what I am saying to you here now, you must take seriously. And it's almost as if he's actually saying it's not even necessarily for your sake or for the sake of the person that you're doing this, because what you are doing represents me. What I am asking you to do, the way I am commanding you to conduct yourselves, represents who I am as the Almighty God. So you should do this. And we just need to recognize, of course, that our God is a very, very generous God. So coming back to this text then, here is the thing. When reaping a field, when going in to harvest a field or a vineyard, the reapers must leave the corners of the field unharvested. And they must leave the gleanings, that it is, when you're harvesting, there's bits that you don't quite catch up. Don't pick them up, leave them. They're called the gleanings. Leave the corners of the harvest and leave the gleanings uncollected. In vineyards and orchards, the harvesters must leave fruit for the poor. They do not gather up the fallen grapes, and they do not pass through the orchard a second time to collect the fruit that is missed upon the first harvest. The poor and the needy can then come in and harvest the gleanings and the corners themselves. And this system that our Heavenly Father provided charity with dignity. Charity with dignity. Let's look at some other things that Let's look at some other things that the Torah enlightens to our eyes. Leviticus chapter 23 and verse 22 says, when you reap the harvest of your land, moreover, you shall not reap to the very corners of your field, nor gather the gleaning of your harvest. You are to leave them for the needy and the alien. I am the Lord your God. Wow. And yet again, in Deuteronomy chapter 24, verses 19 to 22, when you reap your harvest in your field and have forgotten a sheaf in the field, you shall not go back to get it. It shall be for the alien, for the orphan, and for the widow, in order that the Lord your God may bless you in the work of your hands. Did you notice that? So even when you have harvested and you put the bundles together as a sheaf, we're not even talking about what has dropped to the floor now. When you put together a sheaf, as they would do in those days, they bundled them together and then took them away. If you've actually forgotten a sheaf, God says, don't go back and get it. Leave it for the foreign person, the one who's not from amongst Israel, amongst you. Leave it for the orphan and for the widow. And that in that way, God will bless you in the work of your hands. Verse 20, when you beat your olive tree, you shall not go over the boughs again. It shall be for the alien, for the orphan, and for the widow. When you gather the grapes of your vineyard, you shall not go over it again. It shall be for the alien, for the orphan, and for the widow. Now, by now, you should have got the idea that in the land of Israel, God is expressly giving these commandments so that the children of Israel, who'd had their history in Egypt, but now God is creating within them, through his law, through his instruction, a new mindset. A new mindset. So that you're not just selfishly thinking about yourselves as a nation, you must think about the other people groups amongst you who do not belong to you. Look after them. Look after the orphan, those without parents, and look after the widow. Wow. And of course, now in verse 22, God says to them, you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. In other words, don't forget your past and your history, where you were treated badly and when times were hard. When you are now in a position of blessing, don't forget to provide a hand of help and a blessing to others. You shall remember that you were slaves in the land of Egypt. Therefore, I am commanding you to do this thing. I just love this. Because for those of us, like myself, who've been brought up to think that the Torah is hard, harsh, and difficult, and lacking grace, scriptures like these remind us of the wonderful, wonderful grace of God contained in the Torah from start to finish. What fantastic principles to live by. Whilst we are not Jews conducting agriculture in Israel, under the commandment of loving one's neighbor and having compassion for others, these principles most certainly have contemporary application. Now, consider this. The Torah does not legislate or specify the measurements regarding the corners and the gleaning. God does not say, leave a corner this big. In other words, then, this is what we must get. The generous will leave big corners, and the stingy or selfish will leave less. But either way, everyone must leave something. The law of leaving the extra for the poor runs contrary to normal business practice. Running a business in a way that doesn't attempt to squeeze every last drop of profitability out of its production looks foolish in the eyes of the modern world. But if you conduct your business like God says, if you conduct your business with this kind of heart, if you conduct your business with the generosity and the openness of heart, the open-handedness of giving to others, it is very clear that God says he will bless us. And of course, his son Yeshua is instructing us, indeed commanding us, because he's teaching us about commandments, that this is the way that we should live. If you conduct your business like this, you will certainly stand out as different. In God's eyes, generosity is a mark of holiness. Generosity is a mark of holiness. Now, Yeshua told his disciples in Luke chapter 6, verses 34 to 35, if you lend to those from whom you expect to receive, what credit is that to you? In other words, if you lend to those from whom you expect to receive repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners in order to receive back the same amount. So clearly, Yeshua, our master, is telling us, we got to be better than sinners, surely. He goes on to say, do good and lend, expecting nothing in return, and your reward will be great. According to ancient rabbis, we're talking about rabbis that would have been preceding the time of Yeshua, our master, contemporary with our master, and those after his time. According to the ancient rabbis, it says, it is permitted to deceive a poor man who out of pride refuses to accept charity, and to allow him to think that it is a loan that you are giving to him. I smile when I read things like this, because very often where we consider rabbis or people who conducted themselves according to the Torah in the Bible days as people who were really hard of heart. And surely there were people who were hard of heart, but let's not kid ourselves. There are still people today who are hard of heart. So it is permitted to deceive a poor man who out of pride refuses to accept charity, and allow him to think that it is a loan that you are giving to him. But in fact, you are just blessing him with the gift. There is an ancient Christian document that dates to around the beginning of the 2nd century. That's just maybe some 70 years or so after the time of the Messiah's crucifixion and resurrection. So this document around the beginning of the 2nd century BCE transmits the teaching of Yeshua by saying, give to whoever asks and do not demand it back. For the Father wants to give of his own gifts to everyone. Contentment awaits one who gives according to the commandment, for he is blameless. It's wonderful stuff. And nevertheless, this same document in this same time period, and remember we're talking about around about 100 BCE, thereabouts, this same document offers some important caveats. Our alms giving, our acts of charity, our acts of generosity, open-handedness and soft-heartedness should not be squandered on an unworthy person. So the document actually says, let your donation sweat in your hands until you know to whom to give it. Quite interesting, isn't it? So it's not just giving indiscriminately. It's exercising caution. In other words, whilst being generous in our giving to those in need, we should also exercise wisdom. It would be unwise, for instance, for us to give to those that we suspect of using our gift for drug taking or substance abuse. Better to buy them something to eat instead of handing over money. A lot to digest and a lot to consider. But today's teaching begs some questions, doesn't it? There are many ways of helping the poor, but what is the best way? And to whom should you give first? God makes us responsible for helping others who are in need, but where do we begin? The world is full of need, and a person could exhaust all of their resources in giving to those who are in need. Let's go back again to what the Torah says. The Torah says in Leviticus chapter 25 and verse 35 that if a countryman of ours becomes poor, we are to sustain him and assist him. We are to sustain him and to assist him. The Hebrew word that is translated countryman could literally be translated as brother, and it often was translated that way and understood that way by those who were reading it in the Old Testament as well as in the New Testament. So, understanding this countryman could literally be translated as brother, this teaches that Our first responsibility is to our own family, because in the Old Testament, you said your brother, it was really talking about your fellow kinsman, your immediate kinsman, as well as your immediate countryman. This teaches that our first responsibility is to our family. When a family member is having difficulty putting food on the table, his immediate family must offer some assistance. So, family first. The next level of responsibility is in regard to our brothers and sisters in Messiah. In the Master, for all of those who have pledged allegiance to the Master, we are all family. And the needs of our brother or sister in our local congregation, in our assembly, should take precedence over the needs of a stranger. You see this reflected in Galatians chapter 6 and verse 10, where Paul, writing to brethren in a place called Galatia at the time, said, "So then, while we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, and especially to those who are of the household of faith." In other words, as disciples, we should be good towards all. But there are a group of people who should have our special attention, and that is those who are of our household of faith, those who follow the Master. Some years ago, we conducted a wonderful local mission, which we called COTS, or Church on the Streets, and we were giving in a significant way to those within the London Borough of Tower Hamlets and within our neighbourhood. We were providing good works in terms of enabling and helping them, haircuts, washing of hair and doing hair, plaiting hair, doing nails and manicures and pedicures, providing food, and all of those kind of things. It was absolutely fantastic. But as good as that was, we were actually not following the commandment of the Torah or even the instruction of the New Testament appropriately. Because in doing so, we were bypassing and neglecting the need of those amongst us. We're no longer doing that. And we're hoping, by the time we do get back to being one another, in meeting together and as assembly, we will want to continue with this focus. That whilst we will open our hearts to those outside of us who do not belong to us, who are poor and have need, we will always ensure that according to the teaching of the Master, we look after those who follow Messiah before we do those outside, as a matter of godly and biblical command and principle. In addition to our family and then our family in Messiah, there is this greater family that we have, which includes all of Israel, because we are now members of the Commonwealth of Israel through allegiance to Messiah. We are members of the Commonwealth of Israel through allegiance to Messiah. Because of that, Jewish people who do not confess Yeshua as Messiah, hold on to what I'm saying here. Jewish people who do not confess Yeshua as Messiah, as well as Christians who do not acknowledge Torah, these two groups of people should be regarded as our family members for whom we share responsibility. These are two further people groups, which I'm wanting to call extended family. There are those who follow the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and who live by the Torah, but they have not accepted Yeshua as Messiah. Those are Christians. Okay? Now let me just clarify that again. There are Jewish people who follow the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob like we do. They follow the Torah, but they do not accept Yeshua as Messiah. these are our brethren under God. But alongside of them, we have Christians who confess allegiance to Messiah and therefore follow the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, like our Jewish brethren, but these Christians do not accept and acknowledge Torah. Nonetheless, these two groups should be regarded as our family members for whom we share responsibility, extended family members. Finally, our Master extends the definition of brother to include every human being. We are all brothers and sisters in the family of Adam. We are all brothers and sisters in the family of Adam. The order priority for giving of charity, for expressing the gift of generosity to those in need, should be understood, therefore, in summary as follows. One, first order of priority is our immediate family. Secondly, I'd say our immediate family, and if you have any extended immediate family, them as well. And then after that, our congregational family. And by that, I'm talking about those who alongside you express allegiance to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and follow Messiah faithfully in the living out of the Torah. After them come those people, the Jews, who don't confess and allegiance to Messiah, and Christians who don't confess allegiance to the Torah. These are next. And then after them, all human beings. And I want for us to understand that that is God's priority, that's a scriptural priority, and these are things which we are teaching now, so that we can understand that God wants us to express generosity as much as we are able. There are many ways of helping the poor. The best means may not always be to give a gift of money, but to help a person to become self-sufficient. You may remember the old adage about teaching a man to fish instead of giving him a fish, which holds true. Simply throwing money at a situation might do more harm than good. For example, suppose someone in our congregation is struggling to provide for their family. The congregation comes around him and gives him a gift of money to pay his rent and buy his groceries. Relieved by the influx of cash, the man does not seek work or to improve his situation. A month later or several months later, he needs money for rent and groceries again. His brothers and his sisters come to his rescue, and the situation just simply perpetuates itself. A better solution would be for some in the community to sit down with the struggling person, help them to sort out their finances, and come up with an achievable solution. Perhaps a better job, or perhaps employment if they're now unemployed, perhaps a less expensive place to live, or maybe cutting out some unnecessary expenditure and expenses. Either way, our goal should be the success of all of our brothers and sisters. What I do want to recommend, and I recommend this thoroughly and wholeheartedly, we should aim to set aside a portion of our income every month for the financial assistance of others. In Jewish communities, 10% is considered a minimum amount to designate for charity. In our community at Epainos, we haven't legislated a percentage, but we do encourage you to give regularly into our benevolence fund so that we are collectively enabled to help those amongst us through times of financial difficulty. So please do bear that in mind. And I know these are times of economic pressure and financial difficulty, but nonetheless, let's still open our hearts, and where we can, let's generously give into the benevolence fund so that those amongst us who have need will be provided and afforded help. Giving generously to the poor was one of the main thrusts of our Master's teaching. Over and over, he encourages us to give to those in need. A life of discipleship requires a commitment to philanthropy, that is, charitable giving, which increases or advances another's well-being. According to the heart of the Torah, even a poor person who is struggling financially should give a little something. Let the rich man give from his riches, and the poor man give from his poverty, and God will bless both in return. I trust that these words will have struck a note within your heart, and in these days of such increasing economic pressure and tension, let's look out for each other. Let's look out for those who are in need. Let's express the open-heartedness, the softness of heart. Isn't there a song that we sometimes sing? Soften my heart, Lord, soften my heart. From all indifference, set me apart to feel your compassion and to weep with your tears. Soften my heart, Lord, soften my heart. May the softness of heart that God is requiring of us in this aspect of the Torah always prevail within us. And in that way, God will indeed bless us. And indeed, I say in conclusion, may God bless you, and may he bless us all as, enabled by the Holy Spirit, we live the Torah blessed life to his glory and to the help of many. Amen and shalom.